Coming up, industrial real estate. Is it risky? What drives demand? Is it just chain link fences, metal buildings, and gravel yards? We're lacing up the steel toed boots, putting on the hard hats, and tackling the Jacksonville industrial market with top dog Colliers industrial broker Eric Bumgarner. But first, a tasty musical treat from one of Jacksonville's very own Firewater Tent Revival. Hello, Jacksonvillians. I'm your host, Ian Brown. This is the Jacksonville Commercial Real Estate Show, where we bring you dynamic local entrepreneurs, deal makers, and thought leaders ready to dive deep and unpack the local commercial market so you can invest with greater confidence and accelerate your own success. This show is lovingly produced by yours truly and Yield Coach Capital. To stay up to date on Jacksonville's nuanced commercial real estate market, upcoming real estate events, as well as investment opportunities, go to investwiththecoach.com. Answer a couple of questions and join the team. If you do, in exchange, you'll receive 107 questions to ask a deal sponsor, so you'll be armed and dangerous when underwriting your next real estate investment. Today, I'm here with Jacksonville industrial juggernaut and Colliers International broker, Eric Bumgarner. Eric, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
You know, I like to kick off with a burning question, my man. And my burning question for you right out of the gates is, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of buzz in the investment community over apartments and multifamily. You hear all about it. But tell me, why is industrial real estate a good investment?
It all depends on what you know about it. You know, any asset can be a good investment, but there is a similarity, I would say, to the multifamily. Why I think so many love multifamily is because everybody needs a place to live. The only difference is not everybody needs to live in an apartment. With industrial, literally every single thing in our life that we wear, touch, eat, I mean, there's not a single thing, unless it's naturally occurring, growing out of the ground, that doesn't go through a warehouse or industrial property of some sort, from the mining of the raw materials, processing it, turning it into materials to then manufacture parts, to distribute, your service contractors, AC, everything. So I do not see warehouses ever going away.
No, and I would imagine if I checked my Ring camera right now, I would see no less than 2 boxes on my front porch from my local delivery man, probably due to my wife's Amazon habit. So I am I'm opening packages every day, recycling. And I know that's just one small niche within industrial real estate, but I would think, logistics alone and e-commerce has got to be a nice driving force behind industrial.
Oh, yeah. I'll tell you, I've been in the business now 11 years. When I started 2012, 13, when I was just starting to learn everything, I mean, industrial real estate was kind of the ugly duckling that nobody really thought about. And warehouses. Even myself, when I went in naive and ignorant to kind of what specialty I wanted to focus on, I thought I wanted to focus on retail properties or apartments because they're sexy and everybody, knows about that stuff. Nobody knows it. For a lot of people, warehouses is this very foreign, but it's actually very simple. I mean, there is a lot of nuances to it, and you need to understand that asset class before it's like, oh, I want to hop on the warehouse train and go buy you'd really, just like any investment, you need to understand what all the intricacies are in that market, sub-market, product type, trends.
I will say, Eric, at one point I had 39 or 40 multifamily units in Jacksonville, the majority of which were HUD or Section 8 housing authority. And I dare to say none of them were sexy.
Yeah. Well,
but I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. There is an appeal. I think retail gets it as well, because people can, you think about, like, I'm just thinking about this on the fly. Like, let's say Jacksonville Jaguar gets his big bonus or signs on, if he wants to buy real estate, a lot of your pro athletes, they're going to buy something kind of flashy, like something they can like take their friends by. I mean, we've all seen a lot of athletes lose a ton of money going into like bars and clubs and lounges and things that are like really fun to take their friends to, but they're not good investments. And so,
Hmm.
like, I feel like what you do is like a 180. It's the inverse. It's the complement. It's the opposite. But, I think for the audience, it might be good. How do you typically define industrial? What's your box when you say like, oh, industrial real estate?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really anything with warehouses, distribution facilities, manufacturing. It could be as small as little multi-tenant industrial park where you have a bunch of little single bay kind of incubator units to the million square foot distribution centers. You also have another component of it, which has gotten a lot of attention in the last few years, buzzword IOS, industrial outdoor storage. Before probably 3-4 years ago, I'd never even heard that term. We just referred to them as truck yards, and then some clever person at a cocktail party is like, "Oh, I've got this iOS," and everybody jumped on the iOS train. But
You got to have an
it's
acronym. That's how people know you're
oh
fancy.
yeah,
When you
yeah. It
that's
doesn't
they
sound
know.
cool or sexy unless it's got an acronym that gives that. Oh, what's iOS? I want some of that iOS.
What's Eric talking about? I need some of that. How much is it?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're talking in acronym. They don't want me to know what it is. That makes me want it more.
Well, and
But
whether it's, warehouses or truck yards, iOS, I feel like there's a mystique that separates industrial from the rest. I feel, and this is my, I did, as you know me well, I did appraisal first, and as far as my commercial real estate goes, and I noticed the people that were in industrial, and I'd also see it in like hospitality and hotels and restaurants. Like people would find their niche in industrial being one, and they would almost like never depart. They'd hunker in, and that is like what they do to the end. Um, do you see people kind of finding their way in industrial, and that is their investment path? That's their thesis. That's their journey.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I've got clients and of all spectrums of it, where some are looking at single tenant net lease deals, no landlord responsibility, tenant takes care of everything, and long term lease. Others are like the multi tenant aspect. Others like the iOS aspect. There's guys that are looking for the value add, find an old crappy warehouse that they can dump some money into and get a higher yield, getting it fixed up and leased.
I feel like, there's been some creativity coming to industrial. We were at a function actually at your event, your party, and one of your guests was an industrial owner that had a large facility that he would do like short-term flexible leases within the building, almost
Mm-hmm.
like dare I say like the WeWork of industrial. And I thought that was quite creative, like
Yeah,
people
no,
bringing
that's
creativity.
yep, yep. Kind of little incubator spaces. And that's a lot more management intensive. He's has that kind of system down. He started off as a tenant in the building and came up with went to the property owner, came up with that, and the owner let him run with it, and he ended up being able to buy the property. And he's by doing that, he's getting basically double the market rent of what you would, because some of these guys he's leasing out 100 square feet and there's no fence or anything like that. It's basically using column spacing or tape on the ground. Here's your area. And so if there's a company that just needs some overflow storage, 100, 200, 400 square feet, good luck trying to find that, and especially on a short term basis. So it kind of fills a need in the market that a lot of people aren't willing to do.
We had a guest, I don't know, middle of last year, and he talked about, although he does some more speculative things, he actually builds multifamily, and he's a large commercial contractor. But he talked about he loves industrial for like the sticky tenants. He likes like kind of what you're talking about. Somebody gets in, they build out a specialized facility. Maybe they have like a very specific electrical demand and floor plan, and they get it all done. they're going to want to be there a long time. They don't, they're unlikely to default if they have a good business. And these are his words, not mine, but he's like, if I want a bunch of excitement in my investing, I'll just go to Vegas. I'll jump out of a plane. I'll do other things to get my heart rate up. But he's like, if I want to make a steady rate of return, predictable, just set my clock and go. He loves buying these centers with long-term, sticky industrial tenants.
Yeah, and the sticky tenants are going to be a lot of times they're manufacturing just because of the capital uh, investment that these companies have to make in a facility. It's not like a big distribution center where they can, install racks into a new facility, no problem, and move all the product over there. I mean, they're dumping millions of dollars and of very specialized manufacturing equipment that's got to be set up certain way. It's as long as the business is still viable and profitable, then yeah, many times you don't see them really leave.
What do you see keeping a lot of people out of investing in industrial? Like I said earlier, I feel like you're kind of like your own animal, your own island. I just feel like people they'll do other asset classes, and for some reason, and I also mentioned hotels earlier. I feel like there's hotels and industrial for some reason. People like don't put their toe in there quite yet. What do you think keeps people out? Why do some people get intimidated?
I don't know. I haven't met anybody. I wish more people would get intimidated. Honestly, um,
You see a lot of people
they
coming.
say
You see everybody wanting to come in. You don't see anybody have
everybody wanting the
hesitation.
same thing, and it's like yeah. So I don't see people, me trying to convince somebody to, oh yeah, you need to get an industrial, and then we're like, oh, I don't know. It's kind of the opposite, but that's just me personally because that's all I do, and people come to me to want to get into it.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I do kind of jump around in asset classes and what I do, but I have so many phone calls, so much communication over multifamily. And part of that is you have a lot of like thought leadership and education and boot camps and gurus and things like that. And they're sticking people into the multifamily asset class. I'm not saying there isn't like a mastermind boot camp program for industrial, but if there is, it's outnumbered 100 to 1 by multifamily. So I think part of what I'm
Mm-hmm.
seeing is just like the media blitz of trying to pull investors into multifamily. Where I see industrial, like let's take like COVID's essentially in our rearview mirror, hopefully. But I remember having calls from my hotel clients, not so much multifamily, but I'd have like hotel colleagues or investors or clients, and they were like, "Man, I would love to sell all of these hospitality properties and get into some warehouses, get into some industrial because they're dealing with the ebb and flow of COVID, all these government restrictions, all this stuff was just, I mean, trying to run staff through these very challenging times. And they're like, my God, if I could be out of restaurant or hotel and just put me in industrial, I'd be a happy camper. So,
Well, and I think there's a natural progression for a lot of these, starting off investors. Like to my one of my original points, everybody needs somewhere to live. Everybody understands to some degree homes, apartments, whatever it may be. So it's there's a lot more favorable financing for multifamily. You can get in stuff at a much smaller price point than industrial. You can pick up a little 5, 6, 10 unit complex and with not a whole lot down and do all right on it. So and it's just a lot easier for people to wrap their head around. It's like, okay, I've got 6 little homes here and I'm gonna get this much in rent and yeah.
I agree. I feel like when you can, let's say you just come into commercial real estate investing, you're just trying to figure out like where you want to go. If nobody were to influence you and you just kind of went organic on your own, I do think most people would land at maybe I'll do multifamily because I can envision what the tenant, the person that actually drives the revenue, I can envision who they are, what they want. A lot of people have lived in an
Mm-hmm.
apartment. Even if they haven't lived in an apartment, they probably did when they were younger, or they can at least identify what that would feel like versus you think about some of your offerings and just that the newbies like I don't even know where I find the guy that takes 200,000 square feet of warehouse. I don't know what I say. I don't know
Yeah.
what the agreement looks like. So I think like that high barrier to entry probably keeps some people out. It's
Yeah.
funny. This was later. I had some questions that were like later in my sequence, but I'm going to jump around a little bit. So as you know, Eric, I did 4 years, Jacksonville Planning Commission. We had a lot of rezonings and land use changes to facilitate, I'll just call it housing, townhomes, apartments, residential, we'll call it housing. I won't say a fair amount of that land was kind of doing a highest and best use battle with, should this be an area for housing, or maybe should it be an area for like expanded industrial or light industrial? And we rezoned a lot of property for housing, various housing, a lot less for industrial or light industrial. And sometimes they came up against each other and it went housing. Every now and then it went light industrial, but the majority was housing. My point with all this, do you see, like, in the city of Jacksonville, do you see us taking away industrial land, or kind of a conflict between housing and industrial? Is there enough to go around? Kind of what's your take on kind of this conflict of Jacksonville's growing population, the need for housing, but also the need to make sure we preserve, maintain, or maybe expand some industrial property?
My experience has been I don't see the city, and I'm sure there's unique little situations that have occurred, but for the most part, I don't see the city taking away industrial zoning if it already has it in place. I know that the city is very wants to maintain their industrial that they have, but they actually have industrial sanctuary zones, which is kind of an overlay over industrial districts that protect it from not being rezoned, and kind of critical areas. Port. A lot of them are port related, and other heavy industrial uh, pockets where they've identified as that's a core need. And we're putting a sanctuary over to protect it even further. Um, it, I, and I just don't think I've seen any situations where something that's already zoned industrial being rezoned to something less than industrial. And there's usually a reason. If it's already got the industrial, it's probably in an area that you're not going to want to turn it into housing. Um, I think maybe where that battle might come is when you have something that's not zoned industrial or residential, and it's kind of in betweener. It's on the cusp of residential area, the cusp of an industrial area, and it can go either way.
Yeah, and I did see some properties go from IL to multifamily PUDs, but they were in areas where you're not like in a sanctuary. And honestly, it kind of made me smirk a little bit, because we're up there really looking at the two at the time, like the two hottest asset classes, kind of battling out a highest and best use, right there with
Mm-hmm.
in city government. And a lot of times it does. Let's be honest, it kind of comes down to a residual model. Under what circumstance, and that's essentially how highest and best works. Under what use can this developer pay the most for the land? And in plain English, that's essentially a highest and best use analysis. And for a little while there, it was pretty hard to pay more for larger tracts, reasonably larger tracts, than someone was going to pay for multifamily. It's kind of been a little bit of a halt with the rising interest rates on multifamily construction, but it doesn't mean you don't have projects getting entitled. Um, well,
Yeah,
kind
no,
of,
I mean
yeah.
it's.
Go
No, I
ahead.
was just going to say I've noticed. I've talked to different multifamily and developers. They've reached out to me. They were looking at a project, and but they wanted to maybe thought industrial might be yield better, and almost every time, I mean, it was just neck to neck on. It's like you're not going to get more for industrial, but you're probably going to get the same as, and being what they know and have done a million times, they would stick with the multifamily. But um, yeah, I see it pretty often where those two asset classes are competing for the highest price per acre, or whatever it may be.
A few episodes back, I had our colleague on, John Rutherford with NAI. We're all buds from back in the day, and he was talking about and I'll have the same question for you with industrial. We were kind of talking about like the slump in transactions, but not necessarily in pricing. Like a relatively steady, like you have. I'm using very round numbers, but let's say, in a lot of in the multifamily guys business, they might be doing like 20% of the transaction volume that they were for investment sales. But the prices, although there's not very many of them trading, they were staying relatively firm. You might have a little dip, certainly not going off a cliff. Flip that over to you with your industrial, area of expertise. Are you seeing any correlation there? To say it one more time, a lower transaction volume, but a relative with what is trading staying relatively strong on pricing?
Yeah. Well, I could say within the last 12 months, I don't know if I've sold a single investment sale. Last year, I had 80 transactions, total transactions between leasing and sales, and only 10 of them were sales. The other 70 were leases, and those 10 sales were either they're all owner user type situations. Some of them were land for owner user new development, built for themselves. But yeah, there wasn't a single investment sale that I had last year. So, but the pricing, even for the owner user stuff, has basically been the same. It hasn't dropped off at all. There might have been, it kind of leveled off. Nobody's lowering prices, and but there's still a lot of capital investors on the sideline waiting for things to interest rates to lower and start buying again. So everybody kind of just took a timeout
This
for the time being.
Yeah, and it's so you're echoing. I mean, the fact that you didn't do like a true investment sale deal in the trailing 12 months. I mean, that is right lock and step with what I'm hearing from other colleagues in commercial brokerage. So, and unfortunately, like you have the benefit of selling to an owner user, and you could do some meaningful, nice, meaty commercial leases. Some of these guys, I mean, I'm not saying the multifamily guys aren't making a living. I just got an e-blast. The NAI team just closed a nice big deal right around the time of this recording. So good for them. But what I'm noticing is, I mean, they don't have the benefit. Those companies don't manage multifamily. They do investment sales, and they're not doing leasing.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, you need to transact on that investment sale, or you don't have a business. So it's nice that you're a little more multifaceted in what your team can do. I did have another question for you, kind of on that same topic. As we go into 24, and you just said there were no investment sales in the trailing 12 for your firm. So do you see, let's just say if rates slide a point, and this is conversational, maybe they don't. Do you see that unlocking some investment sales? Do you think it's as simple as declining rates, or what do you think forecasting to 24? Do you see a transactional uptick in 24?
No, I do. I think the first half of the year is going to be a little still kind of the pace of the end of last year, and then the end of the second half of this year will be kind of where the beginning of last year kind of started, but quickly fizzled off, and that's kind of rumor on the street what everybody's kind of feeling. And as long as once we get that first little drop, I think people are going to start coming out. It's like, all right, where's the deals? I mean, I still get calls all the time. It's like, oh yeah, I'm looking for a deal. I'm looking for, keep me in mind. It's like, well, there isn't anything right now. Unless you want to have negative debt service cash flow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, and this is barely related, but I was watching the GameStop documentary on Netflix, and they had like the diamond hands and hold strong, and there is a correlation. I think the market sentiment is like, why sell at a discount right now? If you own real estate right now, why? You just sit tight unless you're being motivated by your debt, if you have a maturing debt. But it also appears that lenders are not real eager to try to mess with borrowers or take back properties. It seems like forbearance or modification or workouts, although we're not quite there, at least in Northeast Florida with a lot of properties. Other parts of the country are already dealing with this. But it does not seem like the lender sentiment is to just start causing problems for borrowers and trying to take back properties. There's also, I've met with people that have a lot of rescue capital just sitting there waiting to maybe come in with supplemental loans or bailouts or mezzanine or whatever it is, JVs. And so it's also, somebody mentioned it in a previous episode, whatever we're kind of like dealing with or going into or in the middle of, it's been really slow moving. The fall of 2008, boom, Lehman goes under, isn't rescued. Goldman Sachs is, banking collapse, all this stuff. that happened really fast. I was appraising commercial real estate and I was like, oh my God, people are just losing their mind. We haven't had any like lose your mind fast economic event. The most we've had is probably COVID, and we just soared right through it. Now we had a lot of government interference to help us soar right through it. However, my point is we've just had this rising tide for now over a decade. And so I think people just aren't, they're not as even as intimidated as they were 12 months ago. So I agree with you. I think the back half of 24 will be busier than the trailing 12 months have been. I think it'll be busier than the first half of 24. And I think that there's something about interest rates when they come down, there's this larger psychological effect for people who are just, if they just want to see a trend, okay, they're trending down and I want to be on the right part of that trend. And for the most part in America, if you want to have a job, you probably have a job. Unemployment in most of the nation, certainly in Northeast Florida, under 4%, so we're at these points where it's like, okay, most people are working if they want to work. Again, contrast that to the fall of 2008. I remember watching the news and boom, there goes $500,000 or 500,000 jobs. There goes $500,000 jobs. The monthly reports were super intimidating. And Occupy Wall Street, we don't need to go down all that. We're just not in that hysteric environment. So I think if we can get through to the back half of 24 and we don't get too crazy going into, when I say crazy, I just mean like behaviors and investor sentiment going into the election cycle, I think we'll be okay. It's obviously it's been 4 years since we dealt with an election cycle, but I think that people are going to proceed with just a little more confidence in the fall than they did last time. So we'll see. The thing about podcasting is somebody can go back and listen to this in a year and they'll be like, oh, Ian's wrong. But that's what I think.
Or Ian was spot on, one of the two.
Yeah. So, but I don't mind hanging it out there and we'll just, time will tell. So I know that I'll be transacting personally in 2024. Will I be a little more defensive and cautious? Sure. But I'm always pretty defensive and cautious. And, I just think if your goal is to sit back and wait for screaming deals, you might be waiting for a little while. That's my personal opinion. So, all right, E, I've got kind of a funny question for you here. I put $1 million in your hands. Let's just say, boom, there you go. I give you $1 million and I say, I want you to deploy this investment into Northeast Florida industrial property. How would you deploy it? And it's time period now. It's the time we're talking now. What would you do with $1 million? I say, take it into Jacksonville industrial. How would you deploy it and why?
Well, if I could find actually something to buy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like the multi-tenant small bay warehouses are those. I own I owned one or part owner on one, and I had another one, and they're just super easy tenants, and you can get the highest amount of rent per foot, in a little 1,500 square foot unit. A lot of investors don't mess with them just because they are management intensive and they have a lot of capital to deploy, hundreds of millions, and it would take a lot of little multi-tenant small bay warehouses to fulfill that. So that's one aspect, and then there's another one, boat and RV storage, which would also fall in the industrial category. That's kind of also overlooked because of that management part of it, and it falls in that IOS bucket. But most of the people looking for IOS are looking for it with 1 or 2, 3 tenants, trucking companies, logistics, or whatever it may be. So, and you get that additional income from leasing by the space, by the month. So you're able to get a nice return on that as well. I'd say either of those two would be
excellent.
Personally, my top picks.
Well, and Eric and I, for those in the audience that are unaware, we know each other well. We go way back, and we also we even co-invested in deals together in the past. We currently have investments together. So I agree with Eric. I think he's spot on, especially on the boat and RV and open recreational storage stuff. So you'll hear more about that in the future. There's your little wink, wink, nod, nod. Maybe some things to come. All right, E, we're gonna flip to some closing questions. We run a little tighter format than we used to, so
All right.
these are just little lighthearted closing questions. Tell me, why do you love Jacksonville?
I love quality of life is good here. It's great quality of life. All the rivers, the creeks, the ocean. We've got some more temperate weather than say South Florida. I like the people here. There's just a lot to do, and probably more than anything, we have 159 million square feet of warehouses. So that's good.
Oh, it's a great answer.
Yep, yep.
All right, favorite local restaurant.
Um, I like it's not necessarily in Jacksonville, it's St. Augustine, but same thing. I like
Yeah.
Caps on the Water. It's a really cool place. I remember when I had a boat rolling up there at sunset, dock the boat and have sit out on the just cool vibes.
I've never been, so now I've got to go check it out.
Really?
I added this segment
You
to the
still have your boat?
podcast.
We need to take that. You need to take your boat down there.
Well, it's funny. My boat's actually under, it sounds weird to say this. It's under contract. I'm using this like boat broker, so it's a little more formal.
Okay.
But yeah, I was at the boat firing it up today, and of course the battery was dead, so I got that charged up. And I'm supposed to do the sea trial and everything on Friday, and by the next episode airing, I guess I can update everybody, let you know if it's sold or not. But so I'm out of the boating game. We're just gonna have to, we'll get our water wings and kick our way up there.
Yep.
I do want to check it out. Okay. Your favorite place in Jacksonville. This is like a location. So a park, a venue, a trail, and experience. But
How about a warehouse?
what's your favorite? Oh, look at that back. For those that aren't watching, Eric has flipped his back screen and it is a beautiful interior RV storage. Tell us about what's behind you right now.
That is a warehouse that I helped a client buy, and then for 2.3 million, and then sold it for 9.3 million 3 or 4 years later, and now helping the new owner either getting it leased or sold, and we have it on the market for 12.5 million. But yeah, the previous owner that I helped buy it and then sell it, he bought it for indoor RV and boat storage, which this was the remnants of the RVs before he sold it. So
I love your answers. All right. We got lots of warehouses.
Eat, sleep, breathe warehouses. My wife, actually, I think I've told you before, she'll be trying to get in touch with me. She'll text me, "Hello, I'm a 1,000,000 square foot warehouse with 40-foot clear height and 100 dock doors. Can you please call your wife back?"
I didn't know she did that. That's awesome. Good job, Ashley.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh man. All right. Lastly, where can people find you and connect with you?
Inside of a warehouse.
Go to your local warehouse.
Back to answers 1, 2, 3, 4. No, they can email me, eric.bumgarner@colliers.com. Assuming you guys can put that on there.
Yeah, we'll get you in the show
LinkedIn.
notes too.
Yeah. I'd suggest emailing is the best approach. I get bombarded by a million calls and LinkedIn's, and you can, but an email with an introduction asking to set a time to talk would be the highest probability of success.
I like the other way. I'm just going to go bang on a metal building. I know you're in there and I'm going to find you.
I know you're in there.
All right. This has been fun, Eric. I appreciate you, my man.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. That is Eric Bumgarner. I hope you enjoyed this. Please follow, rate, review, share the episode with a friend. Help us grow. It makes a huge difference. Allows us to get quality guests like Eric today. As I mentioned at the top of the show, to stay up to date and never miss a beat, go to investwiththecoach.com, answer a couple questions, and join the team. If you're into scrolling, not mindlessly, but very focused scrolling, check us out at Yield Coach on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. That's a wrap on this Jacksonville Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm your host, Ian Brown, signing off and reminding everyone to lace up and leave it all on the field. Yield Coach out.